It was the kind of cold that crept into your bones. The wind didn't just blow, it whispered through the pine trees like it knew your name, like it was warning you of something. That's what it felt like when Ellie Roy first stepped off the old Greyhound bus and into Frostlake, a tiny mountain town tucked deep into the Laurentians, somewhere north of Montreal where GPS barely worked and people still trusted their neighbors to keep secrets. Ellie wasn't looking for trouble. She was looking for silence. The kind that doesn't echo, the kind you can only find after you've lost something big. For her, that something had been a life in Toronto she no longer recognized, a failed engagement, a career that vanished overnight, and a miscarriage that took more than just a baby. She inherited the cabin from her estranged uncle, a man she barely remembered but who, according to the letter that came with the lawyer's envelope, had spent the last 20 years watching over the lake. That was all it said. No explanation. No condolences. Just a deed and a key wrapped in wax paper. The cabin sat on the edge of the lake like an old man watching the horizon. It was solid, made of timber so dark it looked black in the winter light. The windows were dusty. The lock rusted. But inside, there was warmth. Not from the wood stove, which took hours to heat up, but from the stories soaked into the floorboards. She could feel them, and she wasn't alone in that. The first night, Ellie heard it, a soft knock on the back door. No one should have been out there. No roads. No trails. She thought maybe it was the wind. The second night, the knock came again, followed by the smell of smoke, not from her fire, but from something older, acrid, like old pine and burnt rope. Then, a voice. It didn't come from outside. It came from inside the walls. She didn't sleep that night. Over the next week, strange things happened. Her uncle's journals turned up in the attic, filled with pages written in frantic, looping cursive about the one who walks beneath the lake. The radio played even when unplugged, always the same song, a lullaby she barely remembered her mother singing. There were footsteps in the snow, leading up to the cabin and then disappearing at the front steps. Ellie tried to leave, packed her bag, called for a ride back into town. But the road was closed. A storm had taken out the only bridge. The locals, the few who would even talk to her, just nodded when she asked if this was common. One old woman at the general store said, "People don't come to Frostlake unless they're called." That night, Ellie found a photograph behind the cabin's only mirror. It was old, black and white, but the face was unmistakable. It was her, younger, maybe 8 or 9, standing by the lake, with her uncle, and someone else, a woman whose face had been scratched out. She started to remember things, flashes of summers she didn't know she'd lived, laughter on the dock, a lullaby in the wind, a woman screaming from beneath the water. Then, the dreams began. In them, she was underwater, but not drowning. Watching. Waiting. There were voices. A hand reaching up from the depths. Her uncle's voice, whispering, "The lake gives, the lake takes." The cabin was not a refuge. It was a threshold. And whatever was beneath that frozen surface, it was waking up. The snow melted slowly that spring, reluctant to release its hold on the earth. It left behind a land reborn, not just in landscape, but in the hearts of those who lived near Frostlake. And for Maeve, it marked the beginning of something she had never dared to imagine: healing. The morning after the fire, Maeve stood at the edge of what used to be the cabin. Only the stone fireplace remained, blackened but intact. Around her, the air still smelled faintly of smoke. A volunteer firefighter had said the blaze looked like arson. She didn't need confirmation. She knew who had done it. And yet, she didn't cry. Instead, she picked up a half-burned photograph, a picture of her and her father fishing off the dock. His face was smudged with ash, but hers remained clear. That was all the sign she needed. Over the weeks that followed, the townspeople came together in a way that surprised her. It began with Jerry Monroe, the grocer, who offered her a space in his attic to stay until she figured things out. Then Carol, the retired teacher, who drove her to the city to handle paperwork. Even Tom, the gruff mechanic who rarely spoke more than a grunt, came by one afternoon and handed her a set of tools. "For when you rebuild," he said. Maeve hadn't planned to stay, but with every act of kindness, the idea of leaving Frostlake became harder to justify. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged. She filed a police report. The investigation moved slowly, but Officer Chantal Roy promised they were doing everything they could. The old Frostlake rumor mill churned, of course, suggesting it was the work of someone with ties to her late father's debts. Maeve knew better. This wasn't about money. This was about keeping the past buried. The break in the case came when Elise, a teenage girl from the next town over, came forward. She'd seen someone lurking around the cabin in the days before the fire. Gave a name, too: Wyatt DeVoe. Wyatt was the son of the man her father had testified against 20 years earlier, the same man who had vanished in prison. Wyatt had grown up bitter, convinced the Donovan family had ruined his life. Maeve barely remembered him from childhood. He was arrested and charged with arson. Maeve attended the hearing but didn't speak. She watched as he sat, arms crossed, jaw set, refusing to meet her gaze. After the trial, Maeve sent him a letter, not to forgive him, but to tell him what the cabin had meant. She ended it with one line: "You destroyed something that had already survived a lot more than fire." She never heard back. By summer, with help from the community and a grant from the province for heritage restoration, Maeve began rebuilding the cabin. She hired local builders, using the same foundation stones. She kept the fireplace as it was, refusing to scrub the black from the stone, a reminder of what had been lost and what had endured. Elijah returned in August. He had kept his word, sending postcards every few weeks from various conservation projects in British Columbia. She read each one twice, then tucked them into a drawer she never opened until the day he arrived. Unannounced, of course, with that lopsided grin and sunburnt nose. "Did I miss the grand opening?" "You missed the part where I almost quit," she said, laughing. He stayed to help finish the final touches: window frames, dock planks, and even a tree swing like the one she'd fallen off as a kid. They didn't talk about the past too much. It didn't seem necessary. The future had become more interesting. The new cabin opened officially on Labor Day weekend. Not with speeches or ribbon cuttings, but with an open house. Locals came and went, sipping cider, admiring the rebuild, leaving behind mason jars of jam, old fishing lures, and handwritten notes of support. Late that evening, as the lake turned to gold under the setting sun, Maeve stood on the dock with Elijah beside her. The air smelled of pine and promise. "You staying for good this time?" she asked. He looked out across the lake, then at her. "Depends. You planning to keep that tree swing up?" "Only if you promise not to fall off." They laughed, and for the first time since she had arrived in Frostlake, Maeve let herself imagine a life not defined by loss, but by what could be built from its ashes. In the cabin, on the mantel of the blackened fireplace, she placed the old photo of her and her father. The edges were still singed, but the memory was whole. Frostlake had given her pain, but it had also given her peace. And Maeve Donovan, survivor, daughter, builder, had finally found home.